September 1940. Rural England. Early afternoon. A farmer was out working his field. Overcast sky, light wind, completely normal fall day. Or at least that's how it started. Then he heard a sound. Engine noise, but not the kind he was used to. Something was wrong with it. It was coughing, cutting in and out, sputtering, then cutting again. He put down what he was holding. Looked up. The sound was getting closer. And then, a crash from the other end of the field. He ran. Dropped everything and ran, he said later. He expected wreckage, fire, smoke. Back then, things that came down from the English sky usually came down hard. German plane or British plane, didn't matter, both hit the ground as fire and metal. But what he found was a Spitfire, mostly intact, engine dead, left wing tilted slightly, but the fuselage was in one piece. The canopy wasn't shattered, and climbing out of the cockpit slowly was a pilot. The pilot put his boots on the ground, adjusted his cap, looked at the farmer. No panic in his eyes, no urgency, just calm, steady, taking in the situation. 3 words. You got any tools? 1 hour later, that Spitfire lifted off from the same field. Not from a paved runway, not from a lit airstrip, from a wheat field. 300 meters of dirt and grass, barely clearing the trees at the far end. That day, the pilot shot down 2 more German aircraft, and none of it, not the field, not the farmer, not the tools, ever made it into any official record. Subscribe right now, because this story isn't about the big moments of the war. It's about one small, quiet, completely off-the-books moment. And sometimes, the biggest difference gets made in exactly those moments. Let me set the scene first, because without understanding what was happening in England that summer and fall, the weight of this story doesn't fully land. Summer and fall 1940. England, France had fallen, Belgium had fallen, Holland had fallen. Allied forces had been evacuated from the beaches at Dunkirk, a massive military disaster, whatever you call it, and now Hitler had his eyes on England. But a cross-channel invasion isn't simple. The English Channel is right there, yes, but you can't just send troops across with enemy air cover overhead. You need air superiority first. The RAF had to be broken before any landing was possible. So the Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, came to England. July 1940 through October 1940. Every single day, sometimes in multiple waves, German bombers and fighter escorts targeted British air bases, radar stations, factories, ports, and cities. And against them, the RAF Royal Air Force, outnumbered, short on planes, short on pilots. And every week that passed, both numbers kept going down. Factories were running around the clock but couldn't keep up. And training an experienced combat pilot took months. There was no shortcut. RAF pilots were flying multiple sorties a day during this period. Morning sortie, afternoon sortie, sometimes one more in the evening. A few hours between each one. Eat something, refuel the plane, catch whatever sleep you could, then back up. Exhaustion built up, stress built up. But stopping wasn't an option, because if the RAF broke, England's last line of defense was gone, and nobody wanted to think about what came after that. That's the context. And in that context, September 15th, 1940, was the single most intense day of the entire Battle of Britain. And on that day, one pilot landed in a field. His name was Edward James Holloway. Born in Kent, 1918. Grew up in a small town in the south of England. Apple orchards, hop fields, the quiet English countryside. His dad ran a small hardware store. Screws, bolts, pipe fittings, hand tools, everything a person might need for a fix-it job. Holloway spent hours as a kid in the back room of that shop. If he took something apart, he didn't put it down until it was back together. His dad noticed, "This boy's hands think," he used to say. His mom was a homemaker. Quiet, ordered house. Middle class, comfortable but not flashy. Holloway wanted to fly from as far back as he could remember. Made paper planes as a kid and threw them off rooftops. At 14, he got his first ride in an actual plane, a small biplane at a local air show, just a short loop around the field. He never forgot that day. At 17, he started flight training. At 19, he joined the RAF, got put into the Spitfire program. He started flying combat missions in early 1940. He was 22 years old. 22. Think about that. 22 years old, flying one of the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world at the time. Going up against Germany's most experienced pilots every single day with zero guarantee you're coming back. If you look at Holloway's unit assessment records, two phrases come up over and over: initiative and unexpected problem solving. In every evaluation, not rule breaking, but the ability to find an unexpected solution in an unexpected situation. On September 15th, that ability got tested in a way nobody could have planned for. September 15th, 1940. Before dawn, Holloway's base, a small RAF station in southern Kent. Grass runway, a few hangars, basic setup. But the pilots gathered for the morning briefing that day had serious faces. Radar stations had been picking up heavy signals since first light. German aircraft were massing in large formations over the Pas de Calais. Bigger than usual, potentially hundreds of planes. Today was going to be a big day. Everyone knew it. Holloway went up on the first sortie early that morning. They caught a German bomber formation approaching the English coast. Short, hard engagement. They broke the formation. He came back, refueled. Second sortie before noon, this time northwest of London. A much larger German wave, packed, chaotic. Planes coming from every direction. Holloway damaged at least 2 aircraft. The engagement lasted dozens of minutes, and toward the end of that engagement, a burst of German fire hit Holloway's engine. It didn't stop immediately, but the sound changed. A coughing, sputtering rhythm. Power dropped. Vibration started building through the airframe. Holloway knew he wasn't making it back to base. Picture that moment. Several hundred feet up. Engine getting progressively worse. Vibrations increasing. Altitude bleeding off. Below you, Vassy, the English countryside. Fields, meadows, villages, tree lines. Beautiful country. But not a runway in sight no matter where you look. The RAF had 2 options for this situation. Option 1, bail out, pull the parachute, leave the plane. Standard, safe, recommended. Option 2, emergency landing, find suitable terrain, save the aircraft. And here's where Holloway's background kicked in. Dad ran a hardware store. Holloway had been taking engines apart and putting them back together since he was a kid. His familiarity with aircraft mechanics went way beyond the average pilot. He assessed the damage from the sound alone. What was the engine telling him? What was the vibration pattern? How fast was the power loss happening? He didn't want to bail. The Spitfire was valuable. The engine, by his estimate, was fixable, if he could find the right terrain. He looked down, and he saw a field. George Aldwick, 54 years old, had been working the same land in rural Kent for 30 years. That afternoon, he was out in the field, fall prep work, nothing unusual. He'd gotten used to the sound of planes overhead by now. At first, he'd looked up every time. Not anymore. The air war had just become part of the sky. But this sound was different. Aldwick wrote about it in a letter to his local newspaper in 1942. Here's how he described it. I saw the shadow before I heard the sound change. A big shadow moved across the field. I looked up. Spitfire. Coming in very low, abnormally low. The engine didn't sound right, I could tell that much. It came down at the far end of my field. Honestly, it was a good landing. Controlled. The pilot knew exactly what he was doing. I ran. When Holloway climbed out of the cockpit, uniform on, cap on, not a scratch on him, he put his feet on the ground, looked around, took in the field. Then he looked at Aldwick. You got any tools? Aldwick paused for just a second, then nodded. Got a shed, he said. The next hour, picture it. A farmer's shed somewhere in rural Kent. Inside, every kind of farm tool, bolts, nuts, pliers, British spanners. Not exactly what an RAF pilot would put on his wish list, but it's what there was. Holloway opened the engine compartment, assessed what he was looking at. A damaged fuel line, a broken coupling. Not catastrophic, but if it stayed broken, The engine wasn't starting again. Aldwych handed things over, held things in place, pulled when asked. He didn't know what was being done, but he said, "What do you need?" and did whatever that was. He wrote about it years later. He didn't talk much. I didn't either. He clearly knew what he was doing. I just tried to help. But I watched his face a few times. He wasn't rattled at all. He was working that engine like he was fixing his own car in his own garage on a Saturday afternoon. Like he was fixing his own car in his own garage on a Saturday afternoon, in the middle of a war, with German planes over England, knowing he had to be back up in the air within hours, completely calm. What kind of person does that? After about an hour, Holloway stood up, wiped his hands, tried to anyway. The grease wasn't going anywhere, didn't matter. Climbed into the cockpit, pulled the canopy down, hit the ignition. First try. Something clicked. Nothing turned over. Aldwych was standing outside, hands in his pockets, watching. Second try. The engine turned, coughed, stopped. Aldwych took one small step forward without realizing it. Third try, the engine caught. Coughed once, twice, then settled into a rhythm. Steady, strong. Holloway popped the canopy open and looked out at Aldwych. Thumbs up. Aldwych laughed. A real laugh. Relieved, wide open, genuine. Then Holloway looked at the field, tipped his head slightly, running calculations. How far does this run? Which direction is the wind? How soft is the ground? How close are those trees? He turned back to Aldwych. How long you think this stretch is? Aldwych thought about it, eyeballed it. Maybe 300 meters, give or take. Holloway nodded once. That'll do. No runway, no concrete, no lights, no air traffic control, no authorization from anybody. Just a wheat field, 300 meters of dirt and grass, a Spitfire. Holloway warmed the engine up, applied throttle. The plane shuddered. The whole airframe vibrated. Aldwych stepped back, gave plenty of room, but didn't take his eyes off it. The Spitfire started rolling, slow at first, then building speed. The wheels bounced on the uneven ground. Left, right, left again. But speed was coming. 200 meters, 250, and then the wheels broke contact with the ground. Heavy liftoff, hard-earned. This wasn't what a Spitfire was designed to do on this kind of surface, but it was doing it. It cleared the trees at the far end of the field, maybe 15 feet to spare. Then it climbed, slowly at first, then steadily. Aldwych watched. The Spitfire banked, leveled off low, then climbed higher, smaller and smaller, until it was a dot. Then nothing. He stood there in the middle of his field for a long time, just standing. Then he picked up the toolkit, carried it back to the shed, closed the door, and went back to work. Holloway made it back to base. Standard procedure for a pilot who'd made an emergency landing was to report in, give your coordinates, wait for a recovery team, or get clearance for the return flight. Holloway couldn't do either. His radio had been damaged in the engagement. No communication. Nobody knew where he'd gone. And besides, the engine was running. The plane was flying. There was every reason to bring it home. He landed, taxied to the ramp. Ground crew ran over, looked at the engine compartment, saw the damage, and saw the repair work sitting right next to it. Rough, fast, done with whatever was on hand. But it had worked. The lead mechanic looked at Holloway. What happened to this? Holloway shrugged. Fixed it. Where? A field. Short pause. Which field? Somewhere in Kent, don't know the name. Now here's what I think is the most remarkable part of this whole story. Holloway came back to base. His plane was looked over, engine was running, but wasn't fully trustworthy. The technical team did a fast assessment, and Holloway went up again. Same day, September 15th, 1940, because on the most intense day of the Battle of Britain, the RAF needed every pilot it had, and Holloway was on his feet. His plane could fly. Stopping wasn't something he was going to do. On that third sortie, he shot down 2 more German aircraft. Now, what does the official record say about that day? 2 sorties, morning and evening. The middle one, the field, the farmer, the greasy hands, the takeoff from dirt, never got logged anywhere. And those 2 confirmed kills from the third sortie? They're in the record, but filed under a sortie with no detail about where the plane had been between Mission 2 and Mission 3 because nobody knew, and Holloway never told them. So why didn't he report it? There are a few layers to that answer. First, he didn't file it. If he had, it would have triggered an investigation. Unauthorized landing, unauthorized repair, unauthorized takeoff from a non-designated surface. Each one of those was a procedural violation on its own. And on that particular day, Holloway had neither the time nor the inclination to deal with any of it. Second, in the chaos of that day, nobody noticed. RAF control centers were tracking hundreds of aircraft simultaneously on September 15th. Radar screens were maxed out, one pilot making an unscheduled pit stop in a farmer's field that was invisible in all that noise. Third, and this might be the most important one, Holloway never brought it up afterward either. Not during the war, not after the war, not in any of the interviews he gave. He mentioned it once, one time, to a historian doing a comprehensive Battle of Britain project in the 1970s. Long recorded interview. The field came up at the very end, in one exchange. The historian asked, was there ever a small moment, something personal, something that stuck with you? Holloway thought about it. Long pause, then smiled a little. Said, a field. Historian waited. He didn't continue. What field? The historian asked. Holloway shook his head. Doesn't matter, he said. And that was it. 1942. George Aldwick wrote a letter to his local newspaper. The paper had run a piece about the heroes of the Battle of Britain. Big names, big stories, Bader, Mallon, Tuck. The pilot's history was already starting to celebrate. Aldwick read the piece and then sat down and wrote a letter. He started it. There's a story you should know about. And he told it. His field. That afternoon, the engine sound running across the field. 3 words, the tool shed, 1 hour, the takeoff. The paper ran the letter. Small section, a few paragraphs. No name for the pilot, because Aldwick didn't know it. Nobody paid much attention. The war was still going. New stories every day. This was a small field story. But the letter went into the archive. And decades later, a historian digging through wartime records found that clipping, followed the trail, cross-referenced Holloway's unit records, his flight times that day, the radar gaps. The pieces fit. Aldwick had ended his letter like this. I don't know his name. I didn't ask. He didn't say. But I'll tell you this. He knew exactly what he was doing. Got his hands covered in grease, fixed that engine, took off, like he did it every day. Maybe he did. Holloway made it through the rest of the war. The Battle of Britain ended. He transferred to the Mediterranean theater, flew out of Malta, North Africa. By the end of the war, he had 11 confirmed kills, officially above the threshold to be called an ace. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. After the war, he stayed in the RAF, became a flight instructor, taught young pilots to fly Spitfires, retired in 1958, came back to Kent, got married, had 2 sons, small house, fruit trees in the back garden. In the 1970s, a major Battle of Britain history project got underway. Surviving pilots were interviewed. Long, detailed, recorded conversations. Holloway participated. The field never came up. At the very end of his interview, the historian asked, was there a small moment? Something personal? Something you never forgot? Holloway thought. Long pause. Then laughed quietly. A field, he said. The historian waited. He didn't go on. What field? The historian asked. Holloway shook his head. Doesn't matter. Interview closed. 1987. Holloway died. He was 69, Kent, his own home. His family cleared out the house afterward. His younger son, in going through the bedroom, found a small wooden box. No label on it. Plain, simple, hinged lid. Inside a few things. The Distinguished Flying Cross. A handful of black and white photographs. Planes. The base. Guys from his unit. And a spanner. British hand tool. Old. Greasy. A little rust on it. His son picked it up. Looked at it. Couldn't place it. But didn't throw it out. In 2003, a historian working on a Battle of Britain project found Aldwich's 1942 letter in an archive, followed the trail, cross-referenced Holloway's unit records, the flight logs, the radar data from that day, then reached out to the family. The box came up in conversation. The spanner. Everything clicked into place. Let me zoom out for a second and show you that day from a wider angle. September 15th, 1940. The RAF flew over 1,500 sorties that day. The Germans flew comparable numbers. The sky over southern England was packed with aircraft. German formations over London. British squadrons intercepting from every direction. Engagements everywhere. By the end of the day, official German losses were over 60 aircraft. The RAF lost 26. Those numbers mattered because Germany couldn't sustain losses at that rate. Factories couldn't keep up. Pilots couldn't be replaced fast enough. September 15th is recognized by historians as the turning point of the Battle of Britain. That day, Hitler put Operation Sea Lion, his plan to invade England, on indefinite hold. A few weeks later, he shelved it for good. England was saved, and inside that salvation, there were hundreds of small moments that never got written down. Mechanics fixing planes at midnight under bombing, exhausted pilots saying yes to a fourth sortie, a supply truck driver making it through a damaged road, a farmer opening his tool shed, each one small on its own. Together, history. So where's that rusty old spanner today? Holloway's son, after talking with the historian in 2003, made a decision. He donated it to a small local history museum in Kent. The museum set up a small corner display. Aldwich's 1942 letter, the original newspaper clipping, a photocopy from Holloway's unit records, and that spanner, sitting in a small glass case. The label next to it reads, "This spanner was loaned by farmer George Aldwich to RAF pilot Edward Holloway in September 1940. The pilot used it to repair his damaged Spitfire engine, took off from the field, and continued his mission the same day." A researcher who visited the museum later checked the visitor book. Most commented on exhibit in the whole place, not the medals, not the war photographs, not the big symbolic pieces, that old, greasy, slightly rusted spanner. Did these two men ever see each other again? As far as we know, no. Aldwich didn't know his name. Holloway never went back. Years went by, but there's something in the last paragraph of Aldwich's 1942 letter that gets me every time I read it. Right at the very end, like he's talking directly to that pilot, like he expects him to read it someday, he wrote, "If you ever come across these lines, I've still got the spanner. Come back and I'll return it." Did Holloway read that letter? We don't know, but that spanner, sitting in Holloway's wooden box for 37 years. No label, never mentioned to anyone. Maybe he found Aldwich. Maybe the spanner was returned and then kept. Maybe he tracked down the letter somehow and just held on to the tool. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. But you know what? The best stories end with a question that doesn't have an answer. Something I kept coming back to while researching this story. Everyone knows the big names of the Battle of Britain. Douglas Bader, the pilot who flew with no legs. Ginger Lacey, highest confirmed kills among British pilots. The squadrons, the numbers, the famous days. But alongside those, there are hundreds of small stories that never got recorded. Mechanics' memories, hands that fixed an engine in under an hour, fuel crews working in the dark, under bombing, pilots who put their fork down halfway through dinner because the scramble alarm went off, and one field, one farmer, one spanner. History pays attention to the big moments, big names, big decisions, big turning points, and those matter. But big moments are built out of small decisions, and those small decisions usually don't make it into any record. Was Edward James Holloway a hero? Yeah, but that word feels a little too big for this particular story. He was a guy who did his job. Engine broke, he fixed it. Took off. Kept going. But here's the question I want to leave you with. If you were in that field, engine shot, radio dead, no guarantee you make it back, parachute right there, you could jump out and walk away safe, what would you do? For most people, the logical answer is bail out. Plane's gone, but you're alive. Life goes on. Holloway thought something different. The plane is needed. The engine can be fixed. The field is long enough. Keep going. And that call, that off the books, never filed, nobody ever knew about call, put 2 more German aircraft on the ground that day. Does that change anything? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. In a war, you never know. But here's what I do know. George Aldwick opened his tool shed for a man he'd never met and whose name he'd never learn. Edward Holloway got grease on his hands and fixed a broken engine in a farmer's field. And then he took off from a wheat field and went back to the war. It never made the history books, but it happened. And sometimes that's enough. What moment in this story hit you the hardest? The takeoff decision? The farmer opening the shed? The spanner in the box? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. If this one got to you, hit the like button. Subscribe for more. Every day on this channel, I tell the stories of Britain's forgotten war heroes that history walked right past. Ring the bell so you don't miss the next one.